a clip into the monstrosity in front of me until what remained was nothing but a tattered mess. The original host was down, and many of the other kids had been infested. They'd become nothing but mindless sub-hosts. Even if you kill the original host, there's no hope for them. They've already been turned into monsters. The only difference was that the sub-hosts weren't able to spread the infestation further, and were mindless without the original host. Still, these were kids. And I could see the first of them getting to their feet. Their bodies had already changed, and they were ready to come for me. What I did next, I'll never be comfortable sharing, and will never be comfortable thinking about. At times, this job fucking sucks. At others, it's nothing short of gut-wrenching. Once I was done, I chased the remaining kids outside, pulled the unconscious caretaker from the room, and threw a flamer inside. No other way. I had to make sure everything in this damned room was gone. When I walked from the building, I was stunted and shaken. Tears were streaming from my eyes. The area was swarming with police and worried people. In between, I could see headquarters agents in their dark, inconspicuous suits. They came for me the moment I exited the building. They told me a lot of things as they escorted me from the premises, but I didn't remember a single thing. What happened that day was ruled a gas leak. When a caretaker had lit a candle to demonstrate something, an entire room went up in flames. The caretaker and all the kids in the room were killed. Overall, almost half the kids present at the daycare died. The whole thing made big news despite headquarters trying their best to handle the situation. There were questions and way too many of them. Parents wondered about the supposed gas leak. Others mentioned the police had already been on the way before the explosion, and someone reported suspicious people in the area. Headquarters had to handle a lot of paperwork, and I'm sure they had to pay off many people to get it all covered up. A mere 2 days later, I was confronted by an adjudicator. Headquarters had analyzed the entire incident and my procedure of handling it. There'd be a thorough investigation of my abilities and my mental state. She admitted, though, it was an unprecedented case. In the end, I was pardoned. The situation hadn't been fit to be handled by what they referred to as a low-ranking exterminator all on his own. They should have evacuated the building, and the kids should have been isolated from one another before I arrived at the premises. They wrote an entire fucking protocol about that day. A record of my failure. And made it into a textbook example of how not to do things. That was it. No word about the kids, nothing at all. They became nothing but another statistic. A number that was noted down and stored away in headquarters' vast archives. For them, it was nothing but business as usual. Even if things had gotten out of hand. I don't know how long it took me to get over that incident. No. To be honest, I don't think I ever did. Ever since I started this line of work, ever since I was little, I don't dream a lot. Most of my nights are nothing but a dreamless sleep. If I dream, though. During the few nights I do, in silence. Fuck the monsters. Fuck the days you become one yourself. A new, beautiful day in this shitty line of work. Today started out pretty much normal. If you call being woken up at 6 in the morning by an angry, nagging bitch normal. Turns out Sandra needed my help once more. It was to set up all the new tech and to sort through all the equipment she'd ordered. Within a couple of hours, she'd transformed our new apartment's barren living room into a nerd's wet dream. She'd set up a server, 2 state-of-the-art PCs, and echoed inside my head one that somehow resembled the word futile. Then the massive cats rushed forward and reached Sandra. She was thrown to the floor, and I saw her try to crawl back and escape. Within seconds, she was half swallowed under an avalanche of fur and claws. I saw her eyes widen and the concentration on her face. For a moment, the encroaching mass was pushed back, but after mere inches, all resistance was broken. Sandra screamed, closed her eyes, opened them again, but it seemed useless. Her powers weren't working, or I realized were negated. Overpowered, even.
This is sweet.
I was with her in an instant, shot at the creature, but my bullets didn't do a thing. Those that hit it peeled away and left nothing but bruises behind. I ripped out the combat knife and went down on the cat thing with all the strength I could muster. I pushed my entire body against it, and this time I made contact. The creature screeched, and I saw some blood pouring forward. Deeper and deeper, I pushed the knife into it inch by inch before I tore it sideways. It did little, but it was enough for the thing to let go of Sandra. I saw the scratches and bite marks on her legs, and her expression showed the strain she must have been under to protect herself from any worse damage. The cat thing, however, had now focused on me. In an instant, I was surrounded by furred bodies and then covered by them. I didn't have the same abilities as Sandra, and I could do nothing against the assault. I was thrown to the floor, tried to stab and slash, but it was futile. Every attack I tried was pushed back and negated. Within moments, my protective armor was torn apart, peeled off my body, and I felt claws and mouths dig deep into my flesh. I screamed in pain, ripped out my gun again, and shot blindly at the mass on top of me. Then I felt them being pushed back and felt Sandra's powers all around me. Finally, I could escape. I was covered in blood, my hands were shaking, and for a moment I almost dropped the gun and combat knife. And then I shot again and again. This time fur and flesh exploded, but even that wasn't enough. Whenever a cat was gone, bloated, furred flesh took its place. Once more the thing came. At that moment I heard Sandra scream. When I looked over, she was levitating. Her eyes were wide and bloodshot, and her face was covered in sweat. Her invisible force exploded outward. The furred mass was hurled back and thrown against the wall of the room. Sandra fell to the floor. She was panting, shaking, and I could tell she'd used all of her powers. I had to make this moment count. I clenched my teeth, pushed the pain back, and fought myself to my feet. A moment later, I threw my tethered body forward. The combat knife was still in my hand, and I raised it high before I drove it deep into the still stunted mass in front of me. I tore through it and created a huge, bloody gash. Yet the wound was already healing, and I watched as new flesh pushed forward. That's when I ripped out a grenade. I activated it and pushed it deep into the fleshy crevice I'd created. Then I threw myself back right on top of Sandra. The explosion rattled my body to the core. My eyes were ringing and my head was throbbing. I rolled off Sandra and stared back to where the creature had been. All that remained was burned fur, flesh, and blood. I lay there panting. Sandra stared at me, but then her eyes grew wide again. I pushed myself to my knees, then my feet. For a second I almost passed out under the effort, but I knew this wasn't over. Not all the cats had been destroyed. Some were still alive, or at least part of them. I could see bits and pieces converging, crawling back together, and sinking into one another. Oh no, you won't, fucker. I stumbled forward, gun in hand, and shot anything that was still moving. I had to reload twice before I was done. By then, Sandra had gotten up as well. She came to my side, and together we made our way into what we discovered to be the bedroom. I gagged when I saw the remains of the old lady. Her body had been torn apart and twisted into a ghastly idol. Before Sandra could do anything, I rushed forward and destroyed the twisted creation. What are you... Fuck this, I spat. No one deserves to be turned into something like that. I was about to turn back and make my way out of the room when I noticed a small, glowing orb on the floor. It had been hidden below the idol. I hesitated for a moment before I reached out for it and picked it up. You got any idea what this is? I asked Sandra. She stared at it but shook her head. No, but I can analyze it back at base and see if it's of any importance. All I could do was nod. For a moment, I scanned the walls and saw the cryptic markings all over the wallpaper, but my vision grew blurry. I staggered and would have fallen to the floor if not for Sandra. It's the same, was all I could get out. Sandra, who'd looked around as well, nodded. Yes, it's the same writings as the one in that urban development area. More importantly, we've got to get out of here. You're bleeding. Badly. With that, she led me from the room. The moment we reached the stairs, I made her stop. Staring at the still twitching remains of cats, I reached into my pocket. I got out a flamer. For a second, I looked at Sandra, but she said nothing. I activated it and threw it behind us. The bedroom went up in flames. As Sandra led me down the stairs, the flames slowly spread through the entire second floor. I didn't care. Burn it all to the ground just to be sure. When we were outside, I felt my legs getting weak. They stood next to me, staring at me with a mixture of worry and anger. Always so reckless. If you hadn't... But her voice trailed off. Sorry, that's not fair. I would have looked up if I still had the energy for that, but all I managed was to stay conscious. Thanks for saving me, Exterminator. No. Dylan. I didn't expect to encounter a creature like this here, and without your help, I would have been dead. As she got into contact with headquarters to request immediate help, I saw a stray cat nearby. It eyed me curiously for a moment before it hissed and hurried away. As I looked after it, I felt my consciousness fading. As my eyes followed the damn cat down the road, I thought of one last thing. Fuck monsters and fuck cats.